Nico will outperform Utah's Devon Dampier in their Week 1 matchup.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of Locked On UCLA Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support, and welcome back, everydayers. What we're talking about today, why I think and believe Nico Iamaleava will outperform the transfer QB from Utah, Devon Dampier, in their Week 1 showdown. Segment 2, we'll dive into UNLV, UCLA's Week 2 opponent, did what? And then segment 3, we'll go a little into a deeper dive as the total QBs UCLA will face in the 2025 season and what it will look like for the UCLA defense. Diving right into it, Nico, I expect a huge game. This is a statement game for Nico Iamaleava with the big move, the big transfer from Tennessee to UCLA. Even ESPN, right, a nice little piece earlier today or yesterday talking about his move, the importance of him being closer to family, and even little snippets about how he's performed at practice, which we all really don't know too much about, despite a CBS Sports article putting out the fact that Nico has been labeled as special. The idea that he could be a multi-million-dollar quarterback in just his third year of college, a redshirt sophomore. A guy who, despite all the off-season drama, is here at UCLA to transform himself and the UCLA program as a whole into the next level. For Deshaun Foster in year 2, that's what the Bruins need. And to get a little deeper into this, Nico has a genius, the relationship, which was detailed in this little ESPN article about how UCLA is working with a new offensive coordinator, Tino Sunseri. The differences in personalities, but the importance of family to both Nico and Tino Sunseri has been important in them learning each other and eventually learning the offense, right? Because Tino was coming to UCLA as someone looking to transform Joey Aguilar, whoever the UCLA quarterback could have been, overhaul what was a pitiful UCLA offense in 2024. But then the idea, the talented Nico comes to UCLA in the spring, in April of this year. And next thing you know, you're like, wait a minute. You bring in just a head coach in waiting, it seems like, in Tino. You bring in a potential superstar in Nico, who's not really realized his full potential after 1 year of starting a full season of college football games, did still lead his team to the college football playoff as a starting QB. You put that at UCLA, a program that wants to be on the rise. It's looking like it is, but it wants to be on the rise. This Utah matchup is unique. The Bruins haven't faced Utah in a couple of years, and that last time we saw Utah face UCLA, it was in a bit of a quarterback conundrum. It was true freshman Dante Moore getting the start against the Utes in Salt Lake City, a toasty September day where it was woeful offense. Utah's defense, despite not even having a Cam Rising in 2023, shut down UCLA's offensive attack, and that was with Chip Kelly. That was a sign of things to come for a UCLA offense that just didn't have it in 23 and was even worse in 2024. Some of the same characters are around Utah's coaching staff. Kyle Whittingham is defensive coordinator who's been around for a decade plus, 2 decades, if you will, in the assistant coaching capacity. Now you bring in Nico in what's supposed to be an intriguing matchup against Utah, but the mixture of Tino, some good offensive pieces, an overhauled offensive line, and while Lander Barton could be extremely good for Utah in this game against UCLA, the hope is a Utah front that was 7th in the Big 12 last season in sacks, not a strong defensive front that led to them not having the most successful campaign, might lead Nico to have a lot more time to throw. And if he has time to throw, if UCLA with the overhauled offensive line, the coaching staff like Andy Kwan on the O-line, mixed in with Tino as the QB's coach and the OC, if you just give Nico time to throw, I believe that if he's just in the pocket, he will have a great day, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and could lead UCLA to a shootout win. And that's, I think, the only real way the Bruins can win this game against Utah. A Week 1 shootout, the 35-32 capacity. I forget exactly what I said to JT Wistrcill in our crossover a few weeks back when we talked UCLA football and Utes football. But the hope is that Utah, with not too much strength on the D-line in terms of a pass rush, which was UCLA's own bugaboo in their own right in 2024. If there's not much of a pass rush, this could be a fun game. Electric, fireworks, lots of points put on the scoreboard. And there's been a lot put out of, is Quasi Gilmore going to be that breakout star for UCLA? Is he the one that's going to score the first touchdown for the Bruins? Will it be Titus Mokiao-Atimalala, who's been hoping for a healthy campaign to be a true number one, number two possession-based receiver? And while there's still more guys that could break out, the most important thing is keeping Nico upright. And there is reason to believe, based off the 2024 Utah team, what they've added in the portal this year, which has not been too much in that regard, hopefully on the D-line, that UCLA could keep Nico upright. It's what did Utah add to what did UCLA replace and upgrade on their own O-line to keep Nico upright in game one? Because if that happens, Nico will have a great game. Now, the fact that he will outperform Devon Dampier is what I'm trying to make here. The fact that Dampier had 12 picks last year, and while he is more of a running threat than a passing threat, if he overhauled following his OC to Utah, because Utah also hired a new offensive coordinator, brought Dampier's offensive coordinator from New Mexico to Utah, it will be an exciting game. But I think that the potential for UCLA to get a couple of picks, if Dampier is shaky in week one in the Rose Bowl, that could be a potential. Maybe he has a good season in the rest of the 2025 campaign. But the fact that I think Nico is a better passer than Dampier will lead UCLA to have a better quarterback stat. Now, who runs the ball better? Clearly Dampier. Even though Kyle Whittingham just the other day builds Nico as a potential Cam Newton-like with his build, his stature, the transfer from one school in the SEC, in this case to the West Coast for the Long Beach native and Nico, Cam Newton-like effect, that doesn't just go around lightly. A former number one pick, an MVP who led his team to a Super Bowl appearance, won a national championship in college, and if Nico is that good with taking the next step up, leveling up the program as a whole, himself individually with the new offensive coordinator, that's where I think Nico can shine with not too much put out there. UCLA had a lot of untapped potential in 2024 offensively. There's a lot that was just left out there, I think, in both 23 and 24, because the Bruins had a true freshman quarterback in 23. They had a poor offensive line in 24 and not the best play designs last year with Eric Bieniemy as well. What I'm hoping for and what I believe will happen in at least week one, and generally what happens in these college football games, because there are no preseason games against other foes, we might see something absolutely bonkers, which leads me to believe Nico will have a good week one game. Dampier, I'm not saying he's going to go for 200 yards, 5 picks, and no rushing yards. I just think Nico will outperform him. And Dampier, I'm expecting close to 100 on the ground. I could absolutely see that. A good prep for UCLA when they face a mobile quarterback, an elusive quarterback in DeMond Williams Jr. later this season when they play Washington in a late game in the Rose Bowl. But for right now, they got to make sure that the Bruins can keep contained. And if they can keep contained and keep their quarterback upright, that's where UCLA will win. And that's where the quarterback will outperform Dampier. All the things we're going to see in the quarterbacks will be defined by which D-line can penetrate the trenches, who can get through and force something to happen and force a mistake. Because if that happens, that'll be the change of the game. And I truly believe UCLA will get at least 1 to 2 picks, force some turnovers on Dampier, who'll put up a lot of gaudy stats, get in the end zone quite a bit, but it still could lead to a UCLA victory. Not guaranteeing that, but it could lead to that and a good Nico performance in week one. Speaking about good performances, UNLV's offense put up a big number, but their defense, nowhere to be found against Idaho State. Who? Let's talk about that next in segment 2. This is the day. This is your day. August 26th, officially, FanDuel Futures Day. It's a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing long shot division winners, ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. Literally, if you're watching this, August 26th, you must go get your picks in for the futures bets. It is FanDuel Futures Day. Visit FanDuel app right now, and start planning your futures bets today, because FanDuel Futures Day is one day and one day only. You're running out of time, but FanDuel, play your game. not to look past Utah, but, there were a couple of teams that did play in week 0, and I think it's important to note that UCLA's week 2 opponent, UNLV, who's getting a lot of hype as a potential upset potential against UCLA, team that can go put up numbers. Dan Mullen getting a lot of love after Barry Odom did a lot of successful things in his few years at UNLV, including nearly getting them to the playoff if they could have knocked off Boise State. All right. But for UCLA, they're facing a Dan Mullen-led team. And while I got my love for the UNLV program because I came across some players right before their LA Bowl game, and we were on the freeway with slashed tires because we ran over something, that was pretty entertaining. The entertaining fact was that UNLV was in a close one, trailing late against Idaho State. Okay? Now, for a team with a new program, we're going to see a lot of things. And remember, Deshaun Foster also struggled against a Mountain West team last year who had a week 0 game against a pitiful opponent that hasn't done much in recent games, right? Last year, UCLA played a week 1 game against Hawaii on the road. Hawaii struggled to beat Delaware State and still gave UCLA a run for their money. Now, you flash forward to this year, the Bruins are taking on a UNLV team, taking on an FCS program, same level that Delaware State is, although Delaware State's much worse than Idaho State. Idaho State was 5-7 last year. Okay, that's a program, the Bengals, if you've ever been to Pocatello, not much to do in Pocatello, that has had one winning record, one season above 500 last decade. Last decade, that Idaho State as a program has had more than a winning record by a game. All right, 6-5 was their best in a decade? It came 7 years ago. That's the type of program Idaho State is. Now, they might be on the rise. That could be one of those FCS programs you see, wait a minute, they actually went 7-5 this year or did something special. Certainly. But if you're looking at the two Idaho programs, it's the Vandals who have been the ones that have been the peak of Idaho State football, not Idaho State, literally. All right, I've seen Holt Arena. It's a sight to behold to go to Pocatello, but they put in a good effort. And still, a Mountain West team hosting UCLA might be a dangerous matchup for the Bruins. Now, what UCLA will have to contend with UNLV is in game 1, UNLV was able to run the ball in Idaho State. All right, generally, even a Mountain West team, especially of UNLV's caliber, is going to be able to handle the trenches a lot better than even some of the worst Big Sky teams. They're going to have that advantage. Hopefully not against UCLA, but for UNLV, they had 2 separate players run for almost 100 yards. All right. They had Jaden Thomas for almost 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their quarterback, Anthony Calandria, if I'm saying that right, almost 100 yards in the grounds, 93 on the grounds with almost 200 yards passing. So for the Bruins, they're going to have back-to-back matchups against quarterbacks who can maneuver on the ground, who could throw it. And UNLV's other quarterback is Alex Orji, the transfer from Michigan. Now, after seeing what he was unable to do at Michigan, you're like, okay, you have this kid who was the former starter, and you bring in, all right, Calandria, who comes in and starts right away and wins the week 1 matchup. Now, the problem with UCLA will be, can they stop UNLV? I think they will be able to. Idaho State's defense is not the same thing as hopefully facing a much bigger, stronger UCLA front. We are still it's unproven what the Bruins will be defensively, but I'm hoping a lot better than Idaho State. The fascinating thing is Idaho State was able to do a lot, and I mean a lot, against UNLV. All right. Idaho State's quarterback threw for 380 yards, a touchdown. He did throw 3 picks, and on the ground, Idaho State still ran for almost 160 yards. Dason Brooks ran for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. So in the same game, Idaho State was able to have a 100-yard rusher, over 150 yards on the ground, and nearly 400 yards passing with their starting QB throwing for 380. Now, the UNLV defense did have some defensive plays. That's what the Bruins would have to avoid when you're playing a Mountain West school on the road. UNLV, I'm not thinking it'll be too daunting of an atmosphere. They play at Allegiant Stadium. That's the home of the Raiders and the Rebels, which is, the one-time home of the Pac-12 championship in the conference championship back when UCLA was in the conference championship the last couple of years at a neutral site. interesting thing is UNLV struggling to get past Idaho State. I can't stress this enough. Having seen some Big Sky games, seeing the Idaho State program, while the Bengals may be on the rise, that's not a team that UNLV should be struggling with if a week or two later they're going to turn around and upset UCLA. We did see it last year with Deshaun Foster, but if UNLV grows that much in the first couple of weeks, that would be ridiculous. All right. Now, if UCLA had UNLV week 11, week 12, like when the Bruins played Fresno State last year, that would be very concerning. I think UNLV will have it figured out by then. But 2 weeks in, while it still very well could be a troubling matchup for the Bruins, I just don't think that after what they gave up defensively, 31 points, close to 400, 500 yards of total offense against the Bengals, a defense that did make some plays. I think a well-refined UCLA team, hopefully coming off a win against Utah. But if not, they'll be laser-focused. They'll be laser-focused, hopefully, against UNLV, even if they lose to Utah in week 1. It's not like they're going to Ohio State week 2. This is not like they're facing a playoff contending Indiana in their second game. This is not that same thing. They're not playing at Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge for their second, third, fourth game of the year. It's not that. It's a hop, skip, and a jump. LA to Vegas, short, easy flight. And the Bruins should hopefully make easy work of early season UNLV, which will not be the same thing as late season UNLV. They give them so many points. Now, to their credit, the Rebels put up a lot of points, and Dan Mullen will have this team probably clicking on all cylinders at some point. I just don't believe in their third week of competition, because they played week 0, for UCLA's second week, that will be, after what's been put on tape, a real consideration for an upset. It might be entertaining. It might be closer than expected, but I'm not sure I'm as worried right now after what happened in week 0 for UNLV that the Bruins in the first couple of weeks of the season would struggle with UNLV. If they do, that 5.5 win total will be rough for the Bruins to get, because the Bruins need a win against UNLV to clinch, to clearly get the players to buy in and have a good start. You can't start 1-1 or 0-2 with a loss to UNLV. All right. Every single UCLA Bruin faithful would sit there and just be absolutely beside themselves, frustrated if we lose this game to UNLV, who struggle with Idaho State. You lose this game, any sort of bandwagon that can grow by the time October comes and Penn State's in the Rose Bowl, when you're playing at the end of the year for an exciting finish to the 2025 season, the bandwagon won't even exist if you lose to UNLV. And I hope that's not the case. But it's good to see UNLV at least struggle early, hopefully leading to a successful week 2 game for the Bruins. Now, for the rest of those weeks, 3 through 12 to 13 to 14, let's go look at those quarterbacks that the Bruins will face. What will these first couple of matchups prepare the Bruins to face? And will that lead to us getting a 7, 8, 9 win season? Or will it be the 5 wins that is projected by some that the Bruins will get in 2025? Next, on Locked On UCLA. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rouette Ready. Rouette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rouette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average, in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. And if traditional options haven't worked, Rouette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch, and you read the real customer reviews on their site, it's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. Head to Rouette.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege. Use the promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Rouette website for full safety information. Cruising on, final segment of Locked On UCLA. The quarterbacks the Bruins will face here in 2025. Well, I've already clearly made my point known about Devon Dampier. Came from New Mexico. He came and he followed his offensive coordinator. So that relationship is already established. New receivers, better players for sure. So it'll make for a fascinating matchup that I think Utah will score some points, get some yards. And I hope the Bruins will do the same in their own right, which should hopefully lead to an exciting game in the Rose Bowl, week 1, that kicks off a little after 8 p.m., nationally televised. Week 2, UCLA takes on UNLV, and it might have been Alex Orji, but instead it's Calandria, where he put up almost 100 yards in the grounds and almost 200 yards in the air. So you got early season matchups, mobile quarterbacks who expect to run, unique head coaches, one that's trying to get UNLV off the ground at a new coaching standpoint from Mullen, and Kyle Whittingham, who's in the twilight of his career in terms of head coaches. But their quarterbacks, I'm not sure if we can say that they're similar. When it comes to facing a dual threat guy, this will help UCLA prepare for Damon Williams Jr. later in the season. That's my expectation, especially Dampier, a guy who is 5'10", a lot of speed, one of the best quarterbacks at gaining yards on the ground. Williams, not so much rushing in his first flash of chances to play as a Washington Husky. He threw for a lot of yards against Louisville in his bowl game. The problem is, maybe not a problem, but we'll see. They're different QBs. Williams probably a better passer than Dampier, but I'm hoping finding a way to stop the elusiveness, the escapability, the versatility of those quarterbacks by the time they face Williams and now have full tape and Akaika Malloy has a better idea of what to do to stop him. The tackling will be much better for the Bruins to get down the Husky QB to the ground. All right. And that's a second-year QB later in the year. Continuing down the UCLA schedule, New Mexico. For New Mexico, they have a QB who comes in as Jack Lane. Lane followed his head coach, Jason Eck, from Idaho. And I already made a big stink about Idaho being the leader in the state of football, in the state of Idaho football. All right. Idaho State might surpass Idaho this year because their coach left. Eck brought his quarterback, a guy who didn't put up gaudy numbers, but when he was there, helped lead Idaho to playoff campaigns and one of the best FCS teams the last few years. Remember, Idaho, FCS, FBS, back to FCS. One of the only team to have ever done that from FBS to FCS. All right, and Lane was doing good. You bring in Eck. It'll be a fascinating sight to see for New Mexico. I'm just not sure year 1 they'll be ready to go. But there is that relationship established already between coach and quarterback. And you'll fall in love with Jason Eck if you ever see his quotes. Super funny, great guy. Now you go on to week 4. And whether you believe in Ben Bolch, LA Times preseason prediction that they'll lose to Northwestern, Ben Bolch, though, is a Northwestern grad, in their Big Ten road opener, that's a game that I have confidently said on the Big Ten squad, I will dump in a huge bucket of ice water on my head, a la the ice bucket challenge that we had years ago, if they lose to Northwestern. Because you can't have a game that's built for a good Big West opener for UCLA. Not that it won't be challenging, and that Scott Braun, after a good campaign in 23, a rough one in 24, he might be able to bounce back, but they have Preston Stone, the former SMU starter in 23, who lost his job to Kevin Jennings, who took SMU to the playoff. But Stone was a captain, was the start, did get a couple of times to start in 2024 before SMU went with Jennings, and they made it to the playoff. All right. So it'll be intriguing to see what Northwestern trots out there. The Bruins will be playing at Martin Stadium while the Northwestern Stadium is still being built, the new one in Evanston. It'll be after a bye week. So the Bruins will be rested up before their flight basically to Chicago and a short drive to Evanston. I'm not sure that you can compare Nico to Stone. Northwestern's always been a fascinating team to play, whether Stanford had to play there as a 9 a.m. kickoff, at a 9 a.m. body clock kickoff and 11 a.m. local kickoff. If the Bruins do get that early Big Ten Network game, that would be a dangerous game. They haven't released the time for that September 27th game, but we'll see what Stone does. He did put up numbers at SMU, but it's been a couple of years, and I wonder if by week 4, if he'll be humming on all cylinders, clicking with everything, okay? Now, you go into Penn State. Drew Allar, you could argue, yes, no, he's among the Big Ten elite veteran QBs that have been around a couple of years. You could argue whether he's the right guy to lead Penn State to a Big Ten championship, to lead Penn State to a national championship game, let alone win it for James Franklin. Is it QB? Is it coach? I don't know. But Penn State is still one, if not the top dog to win the Big Ten. I know I think on the Big Ten squad I said Ohio State, but Penn State has the veterans. They have the QB, and he is probably the best quarterback UCLA is expected to face. Maybe he's not the most dominant when it comes to rushing on the ground, throwing it all over, but he's the guy that leads the biggest, baddest team on UCLA's schedule that comes to the Rose Bowl. So we'll see how that goes. We could argue different things. I do think Drew Allar is overhyped and overrated, but of all the guys, of all the systems that stayed around, Allar's been there, and that'll be an interesting one and a rough one to face a veteran quarterback. The ones that are interesting are the games that might see familiar faces. October 11th against Michigan State, a key, pivotal game. It will be the last of the three road games to start the UCLA season in early to mid-October, when the Bruins aren't facing a ranked team on the road or a bitter rival in USC, all right? Because the Bruins play Indiana, they play Ohio State, and USC all on the road this year to end the season. But they start UNLV, Northwestern, and Michigan State. Michigan State's got Childs with Jonathan Smith. The beauty about that, the Bruins have tape. Ikaika Malloy, despite all the staff changes, has coached against this guy. He has coached against Childs. So I'm hoping that while he wasn't the defensive coordinator, he was in those defensive meetings, he was on the staff where the Bruins played him 2 years ago. There'll be plenty of tape, almost a year and a half's worth, of Childs playing starters reps under Jonathan Smith from Oregon State to Michigan State, that after the in-person experience, probably seeing the growth on tape, even though it's a early road game and an early kick, I think the Bruins can game plan enough to hopefully get a win against Michigan State, because that is a pivotal game for the Bruins to win, to get above that 5.5 win total. It's huge, absolutely huge. If they don't win that game against Sparty, I just don't view them possibly having a good year. Not that that game is the only one on the schedule that can determine everything, but that is a pivotal point in the season. After that, the Bruins are facing Maryland, who is probably the only team on UCLA's schedule that is not officially named the starting quarterback. Mike Locksley, who is coaching for his job in 2025, is either going to go with Malik Washington, the freshman, or Justin Martin, the UCLA Bruin, who could have been the most veteran QB on this team and maybe had the inside track to start. Or UCLA and Deshaun Foster quietly told him to get the boot, go out. I'm not saying that's what happened. Let's be clear. But there are teams and cases that if you think kids go to the transfer portal on their own right, there are also coaches and teams that say, yeah, you can stay and compete, but you should head to the portal. I'm not sure what was Martin's case. And maybe he might not start at Maryland. But it'd be interesting to see at that point, does Maryland have a win? Do they have a couple of wins? Will it be the true freshman Malik Washington? Will it be Justin Martin in the return to the Rose Bowl? I'm not sure. Either way, that should be banked up as a win. Indiana's QB is Fernando Mendoza, a guy who I really wanted UCLA to get in the transfer portal in the winter window, a coveted prospect out of Cal. And the Bruins did steal Cal's receivers coach. They took a running back and a receiver. Javian Jet Thomas will absolutely be outstanding for the Bruins, as I believe Mikey Matthews will be as a slot guy and a punt returner. But if you added Fernando Mendoza, man, Cal was scoring points last year when Mendoza was healthy. They had some bad luck to not have more wins in ACC play last year, including beating Miami when they had a packed out house in Berkeley. But, Indiana, we'll see what happens. The Bruins have stolen Indiana's QB's coach and co-OC in Tino. Does that lead to something not as successful for Curt Cignetti? I think by late October, for a team that's expected to be good, I don't think that would be a problem, but it should be a fun one in Bloomington. Nebraska, a team where UCLA faced Dylan Raiola, who gets all the mannerisms of Patrick Mahomes down, but will he get the winning ways and successful numbers and put it together in his true sophomore campaign? A lot of go big red chants in early November, but the Bruins already have the tape on him, a true sophomore, and hopefully can beat him in year number 2 for the second straight year. Next, true freshman Julian Sayin, November 15th. Now, by this point, we'll know if Sayin's doing good things, if Sayin is not playing well as a true freshman quarterback. But the tough thing is, by the time you're in mid-November, I think a UCLA game shouldn't be too troubling for him, it's good that when you're facing a top 2 or 3 team in the country, preseason-wise, the expectation for Ohio State, that it is a true freshman quarterback. It's not a veteran team. This was last year, and you had to go face Will Howard. I know Ohio State laid an egg against Michigan at home, but if the Bruins are going to go face a veteran team, then that would have been one thing. It would have been even greater if the Bruins could have faced Ohio State when Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator. Too bad. That sucks. Big Ten couldn't make that happen. True freshman QB, I think will have worked out as true freshman, a good portion of those true freshman mistakes out, but it still leaves Ohio State potentially open. They might be open for an upset. Who knows in that mid-November? I don't know. Am I stupid for saying that? I'm not expecting it to happen, but he'll have worked out, I think, a lot of those freshman mistakes by then. I've already talked about Washington with DeMond Williams Jr. The Bruins looked foolish when he came into the game late in the game against the Bruins in Seattle in 2024, and the ability to escape broken tackles, to escape huge chunks of loss and turn that into positive yardage and still keep drives alive. He's dangerous. He is really dangerous, and that's why a lot of people are high on Washington to leap up into that next tier in year 2 under Jed Fish. I think the Bruins could be good, but if they can't tackle Williams after 2 matchups with elusive quarterbacks early in the season, then they probably wouldn't have learned the lesson, and the Bruins aren't having a good season. Finally, you have Jayden Maiava, who under the guidance of Lincoln Riley might not even have his head coach, or USC could be playing for all the marbles in late November against the Bruins in the Coliseum. Maiava didn't really impress me. It was a shocking switch when USC had Miller Moss and then went to Maiava later in the year. And I'm not sure he fully impressed me, but I do think probably by that time, a full year of Lincoln Riley play calling and all that, he should be okay. I just wonder where UCLA will be at that point on November 29th against the USC Trojans, that weekend of Thanksgiving in the Coliseum. I think the Bruins will do good. And unless Maiava is having a good year, hopefully another win in the Coliseum. That is my hope. That is my dream. And I hope the Bruins get above 5.5. I do think they can get to 6 to 7, and a great year puts them at 8 to 9. Expectation isn't there, but there is a realistic shot that UCLA can get there. And I think that's what we all need to believe as UCLA fans. It can go up, it can go down. And that will be fun on this roller coaster, where we're going to react to this game right after the UCLA-Utah game. We'll react to it right after on the Locked On UCLA channel. So like, comment, subscribe, but wait for that reaction on Locked On UCLA. There'll be a postcast after our reaction, but we'll have a good reaction very quickly thereafter the UCLA-Utah game. So like, comment, subscribe, and get ready to rock and roll. In the meantime, hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.